Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and of course, all the witnesses that have joined us today. The work of this committee has done to dismantle environmental racism, restore and preserve our nation's lands, and uplift the importance of clean air and a healthy environment has had a significant impact on the life of people in Chicagoland. However, it is well known that we as lawmakers don't do this work alone. As an elected representatives, we have a responsibility to carry with us the voices of our constituents, and with that comes great responsibility. That said, we reach out to the brightest minds across the world, many of which I would argue reside in my district to craft the most impactful policies. And it's important that the partners that we work closely with understand the practical and tangible benefits of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and why historically that has not always been the case. Some questions for our panelists. Mr. Forbes, it's well documented that the early American conservation movement was exclusionary and often disparaging of communities of color. You have already uh, pointed to some instances. In fact, writings from an early leader of the conservation movement described Indigenous and Black people as dirty, lazy, and uncivilized. In your view, how has that troubled foundation determined which environmental policies tend to be prioritized? And are certain communities and their priorities still being left out?
Thank you so much, Congressman. Of course they are, is the short answer. Those, the origin stories that you speak about, we in the environmental movement, we have to speak about them. We have to acknowledge them. That is the only way. It's not about shaming us or punishing us. It's the only way to liberate us to actually do the work that we need to do. A key tenet of this conversation has been about prioritizing the most affected. I think the only path to getting there is by acknowledging how we have failed to do that in the past. Um, every time I've seen that happen, sir, I think the organizations have come out of that process stronger and more capable then of making space and standing beside others to allow them to lead and carry the work.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Question for Mr. Dosunmo. In my community, organizers on the ground are often driving most of our impactful climate wins. In Chicago Southeast and Southwest sides, communities are fighting to reject plants that are proposed that would increase pollution levels in an already burdened community. Mr. Dosunmu, from your perspective, why is it important that these stories and locally driven environmental movements are being shared and supported by mainstream environmental organizations and foundations?
Thank you so much, Congressman. And I will just say that the work happening in your district is very close to my heart. I lived on the south side of Chicago during college. So I know that work and that area very well, and the organizations that are lifting up that work. And what I will say is that, many funders are operating under a false notion that you can do environmental work without power building work. And I think part of what the example that you've laid out, the examples that you've laid out in your district highlight, is that communities of color understand that that work cannot be disconnected from power building work. And so they're actually working not just to tackle kind of traditional environmental notions, but they're also working to build meaningful political power among those residents so that they are able to really shift the center of gravity environmentally. And so the reason it's important to lift up those examples is that it really highlights the intersectionality of environmentalism and meaningful power building in communities of color.
Thank you. And I'll just end with this. Black and brown leaders and organizations and individuals must be engaged, uplifted, and supported if we're to truly tackle the climate crisis. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.